And this is a really juicy tidbit here. One athletic administrator offers his own prediction. I think the highest odds, and it may not be more than 50%, is that the Pac-12 salvages something in the short term to keep it together and is dead man walking for 4 years with the Big Ten and Big 12. It is Jake with Master of Football back at it again. Happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be updated on everything college football, pro football, Madden, EA college football, NFL draft, anything related to American football, hit that red subscribe button. You will not be disappointed. Quest for 1K for $9.85 or $15 away. Hit the red subscribe button, baby. You know you want to. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Yeah, man, we've had a couple of bangers recently these last couple of days. And again, most of the people here know me from some college football content. I love college football. Do some pro, do some, draft stuff like that. But however, college football is gearing up right now because unfortunately, pro football is kind of dying down. There's some free agency signings here and there. Rookie mini camps are coming up. But for the most part, people are getting ready. It's starting to be nice outside, this and that. However, there's one thing we know about July 4th weekend. The last 2 years, it's been pretty hot in the conference realignment talk. And again, we're hearing about it more and more each day. So we referenced an article a couple days ago from Ross Dellinger that was nicknamed the 7 schools from Brett Murphy, nicknamed the Magnificent 7 that they're going to leave. Check that video out. I just posted one about it yesterday, and I posted one about the Pac-12 situation on Monday. I want to talk about Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, basically the lesser 3 right now. And again, they're not lesser. They are still Autonomy 5 conferences. They're doing very well relative to especially the G5 schools. FCS is not even a question. But compared to Big 10 and SEC, there is a clear gap there in TV rights, and there's a clear gap there in, championship ability. Now, we do know that the Big 12 had TCU in the championship. They didn't exactly play very well. But remember, the Big 10 was 0-2, the Big 12 was 1-1, and the SEC was 2-0 in the CFP. Remember that, Big 10. But I want to talk about those 3 lesser than ones. Big 12, ACC, Pac-12, because there's a lot of things that are going back and forth. We need to address some things right here because there's some new information that I saw. Again, I'm not the first one to have seen it, but I want to make sure I can address it because it affects the Pac-12 and it'll affect the Big 12. Well, what I want to do here is kind of go over that information, talk about basically the best case scenario, the worst case scenario for both the Big 12, Pac-12, and the ACC, as well as what I think is going to happen. Let's get into that article real quick. So here we go. This was the article a couple of days ago from Ross Dellinger. Talks about the next wave is coming, expansion, realignment, and what's at stake for the Power 5 conferences. This was a really important section down here talking about the Big 12 and the Pac-12. It says, back to the fight out west. The Pac-12, Big 12 realignment battle will either cause small ripples across the national landscape. This happens if the Pac-12 remains intact, or trigger a tidal wave of change stretching from coast to coast. This happens if the Pac-12 has more defections. We will talk about that in a second here. It all hinges on the viability of the Pac-12's new broadcasting contract, both from a financial and visibility perspective. Sure, the money could be better or the same as the Big 12, but what if most of the games are on streaming? The league is in the 10th month of negotiations, and the believable details from those negotiations have been scarce. And again, we've shared everything from CW, Apple TV Plus, they're here and there. We do not know. I've heard a couple people in my comments basically say, yo, dude, if this is a streaming only option, some teams might bail. I don't know. I'm not going to touch that. But again, we want to continue on here. Says right here that the Pac-12's potential instability has been the single most speculated subject across the college sports landscape over the past few months. And again, that was when we saw USC and UCLA leave. A lot of people are like, why the hell would anybody else stay? There is still some value there. Don't tell that to Big 12 fans. I love my Big 12 fans out there. But again, there's a lot of Big 12 fans that are loving the fact of the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 has kind of been a very pompous of the fact that we are a very good institutional, conference. And now they might fall apart. So they're really reveling in that situation here. Through it all, the conference has publicly shown confidence in the face of assumptions of its impending doom. And again, for the most part, I have no indications that they are falling apart. But again, Brett Yormark out there, he's starting to talk a little smack, poke a little fun out there, see what happens. So you can't really stop it because until you sign a deal, haters going to hate. That's what we'll say. One experienced executive describes the entire situation as the most perplexing he's ever witnessed in a media rights negotiation. Factions have formed. Those inside the Big 12 gunning for Pac-12 defections believe the league is cooked, and then those in the Pac-12 wanting to protect its 10 schools believe the league will arrive at a strong enough deal coinciding with a short grant of rights 4 to 6 years. And then there is the media, which has produced varying reports of the situation, even sometimes sparring with one another over those reports. Basically what that is a bunch of people who graduate from Pac-12 schools like, oh, we're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And a bunch of people who graduated from Big 12 schools are like, you guys definitely aren't going to be fine. That's basically just what's happening. I kind of get tired of it. But again, I do think it's important to kind of talk about what this could mean, not from a trash talk perspective, but what could happen later on, especially on the field, because this conference realignment affects those games. This next section is very important. It says right here, one thing is certain, the Pac-12 plans to expand by adding San Diego State and maybe SMU, coinciding with its completion of a new TV deal at USC, UCLA. They both left. People are like, oh, add Fresno State. They're in California. Fresno State's closer to the Bay Area, that Sacramento area. San Jose State's in the Bay Area. The only other presence of college football, especially at the FBS level in Southern California, is San Diego State. They need to add that in there for recruiting, for presence, this and that. They need to do that there. Really important line here, but there is a deadline. To start play in 2024, San Diego State owes the Mountain West an exit fee of about $17 million. That triples in cost July 1, a reason for a quasi-deadline to the situation. And again, you think about that situation there. So basically, if June 30th of 2023, they come out and they announce we're leaving, then they would owe $17 million to play by 2024. If they were to not do that, they elected one day later, they would own about, what is that? That's $51 million. So that would drastically cut into their short-term profits of joining the league. Remember here, if they join the Pac-12, more than likely, they're not going to have a full payout. We saw that with Maryland. We saw that with Rutgers as they entered the Big Ten and so on. We're going to see that going forward is like, listen, we're going to add you. You're going to help us out for the first deal. I need you to take a little bit less. Again, you're probably going to get more from the conference you came from, but we want to make sure here that we can, not hurt our current members by bringing in somebody new. So again, that's probably what's going to happen here. And this is a really juicy tidbit here. One athletic administrator offers his own prediction. I think the highest odds, and it may not be more than 50%, is that the Pac-12 salvages something in the short term to keep it together and is dead man walking for 4 years with the Big Ten and Big 12 sitting there. Remember here, the reason Big Ten is sitting there to salvage away the top of the conference, and the Big 12 is there to take kind of the rest in this instance. So here we go. We have ACC, Pac-12, and Big 12. I have the best case and then the worst case. In some cases, we'll have a bad case, something that you don't like, but you'll live with to some degree here. So for the ACC, it's pretty simple here. Their best case scenario, and I've seen this happen many, many times before in conversations here and there in articles and this and that, we're seeing here that a revenue sharing model is agreed upon through 2036. So the best case scenario is they're like, listen, this grant of rights is a pain in the butt. We're just going to keep it. Now, the people who are going to be most hurt by this, probably Boston College. Wake Forest actually has had a pretty good football team these last couple of years, so they might not be as hurt as you would want them to be. Duke. But the teams that don't really care in football really kind of goes through there. So we see here that wins, title games / playoff appearances are formed into a calculation that generate a team's payout. That way, Florida State can say, yeah, well, we got $47 million. While, let's just say Virginia has a bad year, they get $15 million or something like that. I don't know their exact calculation here, but they would formulate something like that because I'm telling you, Florida State's and Miami's, two big hosses in that conference, really don't like the fact that potentially they're going to get less money than UCF pretty quick here. It might not happen, but it's certainly on the table here. A worst case scenario for the ACC is that the Magnificent Seven finds a way to break the grant of rights. I have been on the record multiple times saying, good luck, okay? The all the power in the state of Texas is at the University of Texas from a legal perspective. And what they've been able to do with how much money they spend on sports and this and that, they were able to move their expiration date of that contract up 1 year, 12 months. How the hell do you think a couple of schools that really aren't into this and that are going to all unify together, find a way to break their grant of rights, and it's going to move it 13 years? It's not going to happen, or even 10. That's a really, really long distance there to go from there. But if that happens, and let's just say they find a way to do that, that's actually the worst case scenario for the ACC. Now, it's not going to be a big situation for Florida State, Miami, North Carolina. Probably not going to be a situation for Clemson because, again, I had mentioned it before. I think that UNC and Miami are pretty prime targets. Well, first, UNC is a prime target for anybody. It's in a region not in the Big Ten or the SEC, and it's regionally close enough. Good, sport brands, really, good addition there. I think that Florida State and Clemson make more sense for the SEC. The SEC has shown we don't need you to be an AAU member. We want you to be a good school, but close to us and just provide really good matchups. And again, how many national championships Clemson and Florida State would add to the SEC would be just immense. But then you think about that, though. I mean, the Magnificent Seven, they're trying to find out. So think about that. The other seven there were going to be Virginia, NC State and Virginia Tech. And then I went through the other list there, Wake Forest, Pitt, Boston College, Georgia Tech. They would be really, really screwed because they would have to find their own way. Now, if you think about this situation with the Magnificent Seven, maybe they're trying to find a way to break the grant of rights because they're like, listen, here's the deal. Okay, we're going to be suffering from a money perspective. Let's see what we can do. Maybe if we can find a way to break this or adjust it for some sort of revenue sharing model. If you think about NC State, they're like, listen, here's the deal. We've been doing well on the field. Virginia Tech actually hasn't been doing well on the field per se, but they're in that group that's like, they're part of the Magnificent Seven. That's like, you're not like the other guys. I don't think the SEC or the Big Ten would pick you up, but they're thinking, listen, if we know the conference is going to end in 2036, we want to get as much money as we can in the meantime. Finding a way to break this grant of rights or be able to change it or something like that is better for us than to just sit pat on our hands until 2036 with our measly a couple of $1 million. And it's not a couple of $1 million. It's in the 30s or something like that. But they're like, we'd rather do that than just sit on our hands. But you think about that it still operates on the assumption, though, part of it is that Virginia Tech and NC State are included. I don't know if they are. Virginia, maybe. We'll see, because the Big Ten still is at 16. They might want to sit on their hands for a couple of years. So does that mean does 14 teams go independent? Do they all get gobbled up by the Big 12? It would be a whole boondoggle. Maybe go to the Pac-12. It's just, I don't even know. Now, for the Pac-12, it's pretty simple here. The Pac-12, best case scenario, the Pac-12 media deal gets wrapped up before July 1, 2023. They add San Diego State and SMU, add San Diego, add Dallas, access to the Texas market. They start recruiting there. The Big Ten is satisfied with the number of members they have for multiple years from now. Now, we understand that they've already had access to Oregon. They've already had access to Washington. If they were going to do that, they would have by now. They're not. So that's their best case scenario. Worst case scenario for them is if the Big Ten comes for Washington or Oregon, Stanford, and or Cal, then it's just the Four Corners are going to go to the Big 12, and then Oregon State and Washington State are going to try and get a bunch of Mountain West teams to come up with them. So, and again, I discussed that on the video over there on Monday. Go check that out as well. Now, here's another thing here, a bad case. So it's not what they want, but it's a bad case. It could happen here. The TV media rights deal takes longer than expected. San Diego State decides to stay in the Mountain West for an extra year. So again, instead of joining in 2024, they go ahead and they leave, or they wait another year. They're in the Pac-12. 10 operates at 10. And again, because they want to avoid that tripling of their exit fee from $17 to $51 million. And then the conference operates with 10 for a goofy few years. Yeah, it's just a weird case. Again, not horrible, not the worst thing, but it wouldn't be a good case for them. And last but not least, we have the Big 12 here. So the best case for them is Oregon and Washington are called up to the Big 10. Once that happens, I'm telling you, they're going to be just fine. Now, I have an interesting perspective here. I would not mind if some Big 12 fans got into my comments right here to talk through this. I already know what the BYU fans are going to say about this one. But the three of the Four Corner schools come to the Big 12 along with UConn. So you'd have UConn up there in the Northeast. You'd have Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado. Colorado has already kind of been in the league before. And then you have BYU. You do not add Utah. You already have the state of Utah and the entire Mormon religion with BYU. Wouldn't necessarily need them to add them into the conference. I think that would be I would rather do that. Me personally, the Four Corners minus Utah plus UConn than just having Utah in that group right there. That's what I would think would be the best case scenario. But again, you guys tell me what you think. And then the worst case scenario, I actually think here you go. So this is where this breaks down a little bit. The worst case scenario is them to add no one. A big reason why is because we have heard for months about that Brett Yormark I want to go west. We're trying to go west. We're trying to go west. He wants to get those teams out west. Now, it's not a horrible case, but it is their worst case for them is because Brett Yormark is going to look like a blowhard for a few years. Again, I do think that the Pac-12 will eventually tear at the seams. Again, we'll see what happens with the 16-team conference for the SEC and the Big Ten. They might be like, well, dude, this is way too many. We're just going to sit here. If that happens, then, the Big 12, I think, would eventually want to get to that point, but they sit at 12. They'd have BYU out there on an island. They'd have West Virginia and Cincinnati kind of on their own little island. They'd have UCF way out there on their own little island. It'd be awkward. It would be the worst case scenario. It would not be as bad, though, as a couple of the worst case scenarios for the Pac-12 or the ACC. And then the bad case, they would not be happy about this because they've been sold. Four corners. All the Big 12 fans have been sold that, but they would be to add G5 schools. No, I understand that there is no escalator clause for the Big 12 to add G5 schools. There is to add them for Pac or Power 5 schools. All that would mean is that these schools would have to be individually negotiated to make sure they get that whatever the contract would be. So, the Fox would want to be like, okay, we'll give you $15 more million because of Memphis. They would say, okay, Memphis, we're going to pay you $8 million. It'd be something like that because any of these schools that join would get a lower payout here. But again, I think that UConn is still a good option here. I would want to have a Western, an Eastern 3 with, Cincinnati, West Virginia, and UConn up there in the Northeast. And then out there in the West, you could add maybe a Boise State and a Fresno State, maybe go down south to UCF. I don't know what you would do, but you could do something like that. You would not be happy because you were sold, four corners. We're going to get Washington. We're going to get Oregon, something like that. You ultimately end up with some G5 schools. Would not be thrilled, but at least you're commissioner wouldn't look like a blowhard, and you'd add more markets because remember, more markets, more teams, more opportunities to sell, advertisements. You can see the fact that conferences are heading for 14, 16, and more teams sitting at 12. Not sure how that would do that. Now, the most likely case for each of these, I think that the ACC is their good case. I think the ACC, a revenue sharing model, is agreed through 2036, and wins, title game / playoff appearances are formed into a calculation that generates a team's payout. Again, the losers, Boston College is a loser. Whoever plays bad for the last couple of years, Duke's probably a loser in this instance. Georgia Tech's a loser, but they'd rather take it because 60% of something's better than going independent. We talk about the Pac-12. The Pac-12 media deal gets wrapped up before July 1, 2023. I do think that's going to case. I do know that they're slowed down right now because of the fact that every single time you have to renegotiate a deal, especially with a team an entity that hasn't done college football content before CW, Apple TV Plus. They have to go back and read. They don't have templates for these sorts of things, so it is taking a lot longer. But they will add San Diego State and SMU. That is my most likely case. And then the Big 12 will most likely add G5 schools. I think UConn is a shoe-in. I wouldn't be surprised if it's UConn. Wouldn't be surprised if it's Memphis to get somebody out there in Tennessee. Maybe USF. Maybe go out there to Fresno State, which is close to the Bay Area, in Sacramento. Maybe Boise State, another team they already originally mentioned there before. I think that SMU is probably off their radar. The only reason why they would add SMU, which was listed in the previously in conference realignment to the Big 12, is because I think that they would just want to screw with the Pac-12. But again, most likely case for all three of these things to happen here. This is what I think is going to happen. So for conference realignment, my bets, if I'm in Las Vegas and I'm at the table and I'm putting money down, okay, the ACC is going to find some sort of revenue sharing program. They're going to figure it out. I think the grant of rights will stay through 2036. I might be wrong, but again, that's what I think is going to happen there. The Pac-12 is going to get a deal done before July 1st, so as San Diego State can join when USC and UCLA bail. And then the third thing, the Big 12, despite the fact they've been saying four corners, I think ultimately they will end up with some sort of G5 schools. I think UConn is a shoe-in. I think that's for sure a northeastern quadrant out or trifecta out there with West Virginia and Cincinnati, and maybe some Western teams for BYU. All right, guys, that's it for me. What do you think is going to happen? Think of my analysis. Get in there, comment, break down, tell me what you think, what you like, what you don't like. Also subscribe. Okay, I'm telling you, I need subscriptions, man. I'm this close to getting monetized. I need it, baby. 1,000 subs. I really appreciate all of you who are subscribed and who watch on a regular basis. But that's it for me, guys. I will see you guys later. I am out.